Hey there, true believers. Welcome to the Task Force X Headcast. A proud member of the Headcast family, I am your host, Aaron Moss, otherwise known as Head. The Task Force X Headcast follows the adventures of DC Comics' Task Force X. Task Force X was made up of the Suicide Squad comic, which was created by John Ostrander and Ryan Scott, which started in the late 1980s, and the sister comic, Checkmate, created by Paul Kupperberg and Steve Irwin. These were two sides of DC's espionage comics.
Task Force X is an off-the-books government strike team, made up of convicts with no hope for release, serving as expendable agents for impossible missions. Succeed, and I'll shave time off your sentences.
If we don't.
You'll be dead.
Exactly. I will attempt to chronicle each title and all the books that the Suicide Squad and Checkmate appeared in during this era.
We're the U.S. government. Who's going to blow the whistle on us? The convicts? Who'd believe them? You? You're going to start a blog and expose us?
Well, yeah, Amanda. A blog and a headcast.
Those scumbags are trying to screw me.
No, not at all, Amanda. I'm just trying to help everyone else discover the joy of the Suicide Squad. Anywho, hope you guys have as much fun with these comics as I did when I first read them. Oh, so many years ago.
Punk.
Alright, Amanda. Anyways, before we get started with our show, let's hear from a friend or two of the show.
Bang.
Decide. It is I, Darkseid. I command you to listen to the Who's Who podcast. Uncover the powers and weaknesses of the Super Friends so that I may destroy them.
Aquaman and Superman, Animal Man and Plastic Man, Firestorm and Nuclear Man, Batman and Hawkman, 2D Man and Hour Man.
Who are all these people, man?
They're all part of the DC Who's Who. Ultra Boy and Booster Gold, Lightning Lass and Hippolyta, Phantom Stranger, Etrick and Arizia and Woozy Winks.
Hey.
What?
What about that one guy?
What guy?
Mr. Pretzel, Mr. Lipstick, Mr. Mitzelfuzzle?
Mr. Mitzi's Pitlick?
Yeah, him.
He's also part of the DC Who's Who.
Who's Who, the definitive podcast of the DC Universe.
Available monthly at Aquaman Shrine, Firestorm Fan, and on iTunes and Stitcher as part of the Fire and Water podcast.
And welcome back. I'm sure this episode you expected to hear about issue 4 of Suicide Squad. We're going to postpone that a little bit. This episode, I'm going to attempt to delve back in and handle the Task Force X issues from earlier in life. The Brave and the Bold, issues 37 and 38. I've got some of the Suicide Squad stories I love out of the way. So let's go ahead and delve into The Brave and the Bold, 37. Again, as usual, all this information right now comes from Mike's Amazing World of Comics. Links to that can be found on my blog as usual. This first issue, Brave and the Bold 37, had 2 stories in it. Writer and editor was Robert Kenninger, the penciler was Ross Andrew, and the inker was Mike Esposito. Again, it was 10 cents for 25 pages. Again, there's 2 stories this issue. The cover date was August-September of 1961, but again, if you wanted to buy this off of the newsstand, set your Wayback Machine to June the 22nd, 1961. The first story was entitled Raid of the Dinosaurs. It was a 13-page story. The synopsis on this: Karen Grace is strangely compelled to paint portraits of dinosaurs destroying Earth. The Suicide Squad soon discovers that she has developed ESP and is tuned to the thoughts of alien dinosaurs planning an invasion of Earth. Using Karen's link with the dinosaurs, the squad is able to transport themselves to the alien world. There they find a race of intelligent dinosaurs controlled by a central brain. The team destroys the brain, causing the dinosaurs to fight amongst themselves and lose their intelligence. Karen is able to transport everyone home at the cost of her ESP abilities. And I'll give the synopsis for the second story while I'm at it. The second story is entitled Threat of the Giant Eye, and this is a 12-page story by the same creative team. The synopsis is: an injured military pilot reports that his plane was knocked down by a giant cyclops. The Suicide Squad is sent to investigate, and they quickly find the cyclops. It mistakes Karen for its love, Queen Cora, and begins trying to capture her. The team manages to escape from it and sets off an explosion which destroys the creature. So that's the two stories. Now for my thoughts on the stories. First of all, the cover. It's a very classic 1960s type cover. Got the Brave and the Bold flag in the top corner for the comic. It says presents Task Force X, Suicide Squad. The cover shows a Cyclops shooting some sort of beam out of its eye, and it looks like it has his hand to a cave, and he's holding Karen with the gentleman of the Suicide Squad holding onto his hand, trying to free her. One of the men, I'm not sure which. I know Flag's trying to rescue Karen, and I get Wright and Evans confused. One's pushing his finger, the other's firing a gun at the Cyclops. It says, backed by popular request in a new top-secret mission, Threat of the Giant Eye, which was the second story in this issue. So we go to the first page of the story, and it's entitled Raid of the Dinosaurs, as I said moments ago. This first splash page is from the actual comic. It shows a water-based dinosaur with a wharf in his mouth, and the squad members are holding on to the other end of the wharf for dear life before they fall into the monster's mouth. In the background, we see a destroyed city. Again, the artwork in this isn't bad. It's not bad artwork in these. My main issue, as I've said when I first reviewed the other issues a couple months ago, is a lot of the storytelling is very 60s in its storytelling. It's got decent artwork for the time. Moving on, we start out, and we start with Rick Flag testing a plane, escape gear, and at this point it looks like the Suicide Squad's been disbanded, or temporarily disbanded at least, because his first thought in here is testing escape gear as a picnic compared to the missions I used to lead on the Suicide Squad on. And then we see Jess Bright and Dr. Evans. They're experimenting with newly discovered elements. There's an explosion. And again, they're commenting on again, I'm going to read their quote here. It says, after the missions we went on the Suicide Squad, this stuff is a breeze, eh, Doc? And the other one's like, there's no chance of us being sent on top secret missions again. And I like these older issues actually have arrows pointing to which panel to read next, because usually read from left to right. Some of these are set up differently. For instance, this panel here, instead of left to right, you read the panel, and there's an arrow trying to go down to the next panel on the bottom below it, and then a panel or an arrow pointing to the panel on the right, which is a bigger panel. So I do like, I know it's a minor little thing, but I do like the way they have the actual arrows pointing you and helping you figure out which way to read the story, because sometimes some of these stories can be a little confusing as to which to read first. You get odd-sized panels, so that was a nice touch. But anyways, Karen Grace, the last member of the Suicide Squad, is painting a picture when suddenly she talks about her hands moving on its own, and she shows a giant pterodactyl. She just calls it a huge flying dinosaur. I would say it's probably a pterodactyl or something like that, flying off with, looks like the Capitol building. And next we cut to all 4 Suicide Squad members with someone else named General Brent. And she's got a bunch of artwork apparently she's drawn with showing dinosaurs attacking the Earth and destruction all over. Again, a good artwork. I mean, I have nothing at all bad to say about this artwork. It is a realistic artwork. It very much reminds me of the artwork in the current Suicide Squad. I say current Suicide Squad. I mean the ones I'm reviewing. And it's not exactly like it, but it's I can compare the two favorably. It's very good artwork in here. Again, I don't want to call out anybody, but my major issues with this is the writing on it. Robert Kanigher, I know he's a famous writer, editor for comics, and again, I think it's a lot to do with the times, because I think a lot of comics in the 60s when this came out, when did I say it was? 61? Yeah, the early 60s. I think a lot of comics were in this vein of very spelling everything out for the audience. But it's not bad. And in fact, these are a little better than the previous issues, I think. Anyways, General Brent is saying that he's calling the Suicide Squad back together because they need to find out why Karen's having these visions and painting these pictures. And again, as Flag is talking to Karen, trying to find out further information, again, she tells him no, but then her thought balloon's a big long thought balloon, thinking about how much she misses him. And again, goes over how he's ordered her never to reveal her feelings, so it doesn't interfere with the efficiency of the group, yada, yada, yada. So we move on from there. Suddenly, Dr. Evans holds up a bill and asks anyone if they can read the serial number. Everyone's like, no, it's too far away. When Karen was able to recite the serial number off the bill, and they figured out that she has extrasensory perception, ESP. Rick calls her ESPA, ESPA. I'm not quite sure. I've never heard of ESPA before. And she goes on to draw some more paintings. Dinosaurs destroying the Earth. Again, very nice artwork in this. And again, I mean, maybe it's just I actually read some newer from this point of view, Suicide Squads. But these stories aren't as bad as the original 3 that I reviewed several months ago. And while we can't tell the team about our love aspect is still there, it's not quite as prevalent as it was. Anyways, just keep going through this issue. Karen tries to use her ESPA powers to try to travel to where the dinosaur creatures are at. Somehow Karen makes the leap that since she's able to see the dinosaur's thoughts, that maybe she can use this to transport them where they're at. Again, I guess as I forget who coined the phrase. I hear it on the Firestorm and Aquaman. The Fire and Water podcast all the time, because comics. She thinks hard, thinks really good thoughts, and nothing happens. Rick tells her to concentrate on the picture, since that's the station to the other world. He tells her to tune in on it. I'm making air quotes in there like you can see it. But once she does that, next thing you know, there's waves. I like the way they teleport them. There's the page is yellow, or the panel's yellow, and there's red circular waves coming out from Karen's head in the picture. And next thing you know, they're in a land of dinosaurs. And this is back in the day when they would break their stories up, and when they'd have an advertisement, they would say end of part 1, part 2 continues on the 3rd page following. So we go through some advertisements, and we're back with part 2, Raid of the Dinosaur. And it looks like a T-Rex. I'm not fantastic on dinosaurs, but to me it looks like a T-Rex. The T-Rex is talking with the group, telling them that in the rule of the jungle is the weak perish before the claws and the fangs of the strong, so they're going to attack our world and destroy it just because they can. And the dinosaur, the T-Rex, breathes on the team, and Karen's sweater turns from green to black. And Rick explains that, again, comic book science, I'm assuming, it could be wrong. Well, I know it's based partly on real science. He's talking about these creatures able to destroy chlorophyll, which is all living matter in our world, and that's why her sweater turned from green to black, because the dinosaur killed all the chlorophyll in it, then turned to black. I don't know how true that is. If you were to kill the chlorophyll on an object, if it would turn to black. I'm not a science major. I think this may be comic book science, but again, back in the 61, it works. So the T-Rex wants to take the team as start a human zoo with them. They take off throwing their grenades. They call them percussion grenades or cartridges. Looks like grenades to me. At the dinosaur, it explodes, and they run off. And then next thing we know, at the last page of this panel, some water dinosaur. Again, I'm not sure what type of dinosaur it is. It's a water dinosaur. It's got like a fin on his head. He pops out of the water saying, "Do you think to stop me because of your thunderstones?" And they're wondering how the creature could know when it was underwater. And then we get the first page of the story that I mentioned earlier. Well, the pre-story. This dinosaur has got a hold of the bridge and is pulling it loose, and the team's falling off. Or they're holding on hands as they're, trying to keep from falling into the dinosaur's mouth. Again, it's a good story, good artwork. When they're not over-explaining things or harping on a story point, like the whole "our love must remain a secret" thing. Yeah, I get tired of that. Anyways, when they're not harping on that, it's a good story. And again, I think a lot of my complaints about the issue is just it's from the 60s, and that's I think the way a lot of stories were back then. It doesn't make them right, doesn't make it wrong, but it's just my own opinion on it. But anyway, so they toss some cartridges in the water, explodes, sends them all flying off the bridge into the water. And it looks like maybe Rick comments that there's no chlorophyll in the water either. The mere presence of the creatures will make Earth unbearable. And they're trying to think how to stop them when suddenly a pterodactyl picks them up and flies off with them. And again, talking about how you Earthlings think to stop me because you're thunderstones. And they're commenting how this creature is also saying me, like it's the same person talking. And they finally realize that they all share a single central intelligence, a single giant brain thinking for them all. And Karen says that she can feel the same force coming from a nearby spaceship that the dinosaurs are loading up onto to bring them to our Earth. And so that must be where the mother brain, if you will, is at. So these guys are loaded for bear. They're carrying a lot of weapons, or not even weapons necessarily, but explosives with them. They throw some armor-piercing cartridges they have. And it says, like mini bazooka shells, the cartridges whirl towards the ominous ship. It hits the ship, and it starts hitting the ship, and the creature on the ship says, "Hey, Earthling, you cannot reach me that way. To play an old Earthling game, you are not even warm. And then Rick says, it gives him an idea, drop the Ultra Thermo cartridges, which destroys the ship, causing the pterodactyl to drop the team, and the dinosaurs start attacking each other, and they realize that's because the hive mind is gone. And as one of the giant iguana-looking creatures, anyway, it looks like an iguana-looking creature, starts turning on the team, Karen uses her mental powers that she currently has to transport him back to Earth with the picture she drawn. I'm not sure if it's on fire or if it's melted. Rick says the painting's wrecked, just like Parallel World, so I'm assuming it must be on fire, or a picture of a fiery world. And then they let us know that Karen doesn't have her powers anymore because the last panel here says they report on the results of the top secret mission, and Karen's like, "You haven't said a word for an hour, Rick. A penny for your thoughts?" And he's like, "You must have exhausted your ESPA power ability to tune into someone else's thoughts, or you would have known I wanted to kiss you." The end. Wah, wah, wah. More top secret missions of the Suicide Squad in the next issue of The Brave and the Bold, or to be continued in a couple of pages. They have some advertisements, have a little story here, and then they go to the next story, Threat of the Giant Eye, and this is where the cover comes from, with the giant Cyclops reaching in a cave. Before we continue with this one, though, the last story, again, other than some of the 60s tropes they have in there, it was a good story. I think it was much better than the last three that I reviewed for this era, the Brave and the Bold. Again, I don't know if it's just my tolerance is coming up on it now that I've read some really good Suicide Squad stories, or if these stories are actually improving and are actually better than what came before. But anyways, let's go on to the next story. I'll recap this one. So we go to the first page of it. Again, we show a Cyclops reaching in a cave, trying to grab Karen. Evans and Bright is off to the side. Rick's coming up behind the creature's hand with a giant, looks almost like a giant nail, but I'm sure it's like a stalagmite or I'm probably speaking from something I just saw in the issue when I read it. But he's about ready to pierce the back of the creature's hand. But we go into the actual first page of the story, and they're at it looks like probably a museum with a painting that Karen did of the Suicide Squad, making them look like heroes. And Karen asks if this can be her wedding present to him. And again, he brings out the old, we can't think of ourselves or the squad, or blah, 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 we can't tell them about our feelings, blah, blah, blah. Then the squad has to go to a military hospital where a guy wrapped up in bandages, who's apparently a lone survivor of a lost plane that was delivering top secret defense weapons to one of the allies. They suddenly got the plane. He's delirious. Karen listens, and all we see him saying is sigh, big, one eye, huge, giant, one eye, sigh. And from that, she's able to draw a picture of a Cyclops. And they say it's Polyphemus, chief of the one-eyed giants who fought Ulysses and other ancient heroes. And they're wondering how such a creature could be alive today and destroying a plane. So they head out for their mission to find still can't pronounce it. Polyphemus. Then the next page, they're parachuting in where they find the giants. And they land on the ground. And then at the bottom of the page 4 of the story, we see him in the cave with the giant crouched down, peeking in at him. And they can see on the giant's eye that they said it's not reflecting us. And as they stare at it, they can see what the creature's thinking. Images are forming on the eye of on the lens of the eye, like on a movie screen. And so they see the creature's past, how Polyphemus, the one-eyed Cyclops, is smashed in the Navy because Queen Cora cannot return his love. And Atho is able to take down the giant because he has an arrowhead dipped in a secret mountain herb, which puts the creature to sleep. So they drag him away and put him in a cave. And oddly enough, the Queen Cora happens to look just like Karen, which is normal for a story like this, I guess. They usually, the giant creature, I mean, it's a trope, I guess, for these type of stories. The creature that's attacking them happens to look like just like the female lead we have here. I guess I can't really knock it again. This story is decades old, so it wasn't quite an old trope then, I guess. But anyways, then we get to the creature trying to capture Karen, and we see the creature reach in the cave, and he grabs Karen. Well, and again, very nice. I'm enjoying the artwork on this. Again, not fantastic artwork, but for the story, it's really good. I'm enjoying the artwork. And like I say, I think the story has matured, for lack of a better word, than the previous issues. Rick breaks off a stalactite, and he says the stalactite looks like an arrow. Wonder if the giant will remember what happened to him the last time he was at Y1. And so he pokes the giant, and I guess the giant has a flashback, if you will, I'm assuming, of getting shot with the arrow previously, because he lets go over when they poke him with the stalactite. I don't want to say it's convenient, but I don't know. It's I guess, yeah. I was gonna complain about that, but I guess, yeah. I mean, if you're holding something in your hand, someone pokes you with a needle, for instance, you're gonna open your hand and drop what you have. So actually, I guess it does make sense. So trapped in the cave, they're trying to discover a way out, and they mention that last time this happened to Ulysses, he had some sheep to help him escape. And luckily for them, it looks like for some reason, I don't know why, there's a bunch of horses in the cave with them. Other than for plot convenience, I don't know why there's horses in the cave. But they send the horses out, and the giant watches the horses while the team members ride off on the side of the horses. I guess it's an ingenious way to escape the giant. I just got issues with where the heck did the horses come from? Why were they in the cave? I don't know. I mean, I guess as I've heard on some of the other podcasts, I guess the reason for it is because comics. That's the only thing I can figure out. Anyway, so they escape from the giant by hiding on the side of these mysterious horses were hiding in this cave also. They're headed towards the wreckage where the plane is at, so they can find some rockets to escape, I guess. Karen decides that, since the giant wants her, she's willing to sacrifice or willing to use herself to distract the giant. So Karen, she's going to sacrifice herself. Rick's like, no, Karen, I cannot allow it. And Karen's like, we're all equal and all expendable in the Suicide Squad, Rick. Our lives don't matter compared to the lives of millions of others. So she races off to distract the giant. The giant again grabs Karen once again, and while he does that, the other team members makes it inside the temple where they find the rockets they were looking for. And they're going to use them to try to blow up the giant is what it is. So they activate a time bomb mechanism, but as they're doing so, the giant again gently reaches in and grabs Evans and Bright. And again, they're, never mind us, the rockets are fixed, go after Karen. So Rick runs outside, and when the giant, I'm just trying to get straight in my head. So the giant grabbed these two men, let Karen go. Karen's running away, and so the giant, kind of funny. The giant attaches Evans and Bright to his belt, like trophies, it says. And as Rick and Karen run from the giant, they find a bunch of statues that are hollow. There's little doors in the bottom of them. So the giants come along, smashing each of the statues in turn, until he gets to the last two, where he picks up the one containing Karen, of course. The caption says, the enraged giant picks up one carved figure after another, searching for the fugitives. Crash, crash, crash. And instead of crushing the one he picks up with Karen, he just picks it up and pops her out like a Tic Tac. I don't know why he was crushing the first ones and then stopped when he got to this one. If he's searching for him, other than story convenience, seems like he should have been opening them all up or crushing them all and would have crushed Karen. I don't know. Anyway, so Rick runs free and runs some geysers. And so I guess he picked Karen on his belt also, because the next thing we see that he's hurling boulders, giant, huge boulders at Rick. Like, Rick's like, if one of those lands on me, it's the end of the Suicide Squad. And luckily for Rick, one of the boulders happens to land on top of a hot geyser. Rick jumps on top of the boulder. He's like, let me see. That giant's given me a weapon, the kind that David used against Goliath. A biblical reference there. So he jumps on top of the top of the boulder that's sitting on the geyser, and he gets the giant to come over and stand right over him. And as the geyser goes off, Rick jumps off, the boulder flies off and hits the giant in the head. The other two, Evans and Bright, get off his belt, and the four of them run towards the sea before the rockets go off. As the Suicide Squad gets to the beach waiting for their pickup plane, the giant starts hurtling the rockets at them. They're getting closer and they're exploding nearby. And suddenly the rockets that were left in the temple started exploding, and I guess he wiped the giant out. The Cyclops. The seaplane arrives and picks up the team. And the last panel here says, as the unique Suicide Squad wings back through the skies, Karen says, I'm going to change my looks so no one will ever mistake me for someone else. And all three men say, don't you dare. Ha 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 ha. The end. I don't know. Again, it's very 60s storytelling. It's not as bad as the early issues, but again, it is very 61 type storytelling. If this is the Suicide Squad I would have found when I started reading comics, I don't know if I would be the fan of it that I am. But again, the art's very good. I like the art in it. As I've said, it's good art for the most part. It's just the storytelling is very juvenile, I guess. I guess that's the best word to describe it. It's just, I don't know. My mom told me if you can't say anything nice, don't say nothing at all. My mom never said that. What the heck? Yeah, I don't know. It's decent. It's good artwork with a decent story. If you can just get over, some of the plot contrivances and some of the dialogue's a little corny, a little I don't know, little. Don't know how to describe it. I guess I'll just leave it. Good artwork, decent storytelling, not so great dialogue for the most part. But that's it for this issue of The Brave and the Bold. And we're going to go ahead and stop with this issue. I was going to do 2 issues, but I've changed my mind. My podcast, my prerogative. We're going to stop right here at issue 37. We'll do issue 38 another time. Again, as I said, I'm enjoying the art for the most part. The stories are a little too much for me, so we'll do another story another time. But before we move on to the final segment for today, let's go ahead and listen to another friend of the show.
Hi, I'm Gene Hendricks. You may remember me from such shows as the Hammer Podcasts and the Quantum Cast. I'd like to tell you about some special shows that I'm doing with some of your favorite podcasters. These shows are all about the live-action versions of comic book characters, and I'm calling them
Legends of the Superheroes.
In each episode, we'll be looking at a different TV show or movie featuring characters like
Wonder Woman,
Dr. David Banner.
And let's not forget about the non-superheroes, such as
Swamp Thing.
Captain William Buck Rogers.
And many more. Look for the Legends of the Superheroes specials under the Hammer Podcasts at twotruefreaks.com.
Hello, I'm Albie.
And I'm Heather.
And we do the Quantum Leap podcast.
It can be found at quantumleappodcast.com and also on iTunes.
We are starting at the beginning of Quantum Leap and going through all the episodes. This is my first time watching, and Albie has seen them during their original run.
In each podcast, we talk about the overall thoughts of each episode. We do an episode recap if you haven't seen them in a while, just to refresh your memory. And then we do a detailed plot discussion.
And we also have some great interviews.
Scott Bakula, I remember being very, very generous of spirit and very, very kind to his fellow actors. It was my first kiss ever. So I am getting to kiss Scott Bakula on screen.
And everybody involved with it was just terrific. And I'm always amazed that people come up to me and remember that episode and can quote things from it that I can't even quote.
So if you're a leaper, it'd be great if you came and joined us. And if you've never heard of Quantum Leap, it's maybe a good time to start watching it because you have a podcast to go along with it.
So please give our podcast a listen, and hopefully you like us and stick around.
Go to quantumleappodcast.com to listen to new episodes.
Oh, okay, so I played the Quantum Leap podcast promo because, again, I'm really liking that podcast. I really love the TV show. If you haven't listened to it, go check it out. And I also played Gene Hendricks' Legends of the Superheroes promo. The reason I picked to play that one today is a little self-promotion. In his latest episode of Legends of the Superheroes, Gene talks about a movie that I enjoy from 1991 called The Crow. And as he said, I believe in the promo, each episode he has a special guest talk about movies with him. This episode, he had none others than yours truly. Yes, Brotherhead, Aaron Moss, a.k.a. me, showed up on the newest episode of Legends of the Superheroes to talk with Gene about The Crow. So if you haven't checked it out yet, if you don't listen to Gene's show, shame on you. It's a great show. Check it out. But yes, this episode I am on there with him talking about The Crow. We had a great time. My end of the recording at the beginning was a little wonky, but overall, it was a good show. Go check it out. But that's enough self-promoting of me. Let's go ahead and move on to my final segment, Suicide Notes. Haven't gotten very many emails. I've gotten one from a gentleman named Ryan Daly. We've been corresponding in brief. The latest one says that he said he'd started listening to it. The latest email says, he's just dropping the line. Let me know he's caught up on the Task Force X podcast. He says, I really love the show and hope you're having fun producing it. He wrote a review for it. Speaking of reviews for it, since I don't have any other emails, we're going to go ahead and jump over to iTunes. I finally gotten some iTunes reviews. I've got 2 reviews on iTunes. One of them is from Mr. Gene Hendricks, who I mentioned earlier. The subject is wonderful stuff. This was from February the 17th. Gene writes, Brotherhead obviously loves this material, which you can tell by how he talks about the comics and characters. Never having followed the Suicide Squad, I didn't know what to expect going into this, but he has convinced me that they are worth a look. Well, I'm glad that you enjoy the podcast, Gene. And again, let me say in here, thanks again for having me on your show. But keep listening, and hopefully you'll keep enjoying the show. And the second iTunes review, the subject line says, an informative and entertaining show. This is by Count Druncula, who is Mr. Ryan Daly. And Count Druncula goes on to write, with so much buzz surrounding the upcoming Warner Brothers film Suicide Squad, it's terrific to find a podcast dedicated to the terrific source material published by DC Comics in the late 80s. Aaron Moss is a great host for this show. His knowledge of the comics and characters is obvious, and his passion is contagious. I've only read a few Suicide Squad comics from that era that Aaron has started chronicling, but listening to this show has me itching to revisit those issues and continue my collection. Task Force X is an awesome and entertaining podcast, and I highly recommend it. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Count Druncula. I enjoy the kind words. I can always use a little stroke to my ego. But that's it for this week. Or this episode, anyways. So again, thank you, Gene. Thank you, Count Druncula, for writing in and leaving iTunes reviews. You, too, can leave me an iTunes review. Or you can go to Stitcher Plus and rate... Stitcher Plus? Yeah. Stitcher Radio and rate me. Doing so on both areas, it can help raise up the awareness of Task Force X, let others know about this great show. I'm saying it's a great show because it's mine. I think it's a great show. But yeah, go ahead and write me a review on either iTunes or Stitcher Radio. Send me an email, go to the blog and leave comments there. Let me know what you think of these shows. Are you guys liking it? Again, do you like the shorter formats I'm doing right now? Do you like the longer formats I was doing? I want to hear from you guys. If you want, you can record a voice message and email me at taskforcex@headspeaks.com. But if there's nothing else, I guess we'll let you go for now. Until next time, this is Aaron Moss, signing off, squad mates. Thank you for listening to another great episode of Task Force X. I can also be found rambling on my main headcast of Head Speaks, where I rant and rave about movies, comics, geek stuff, and whatever is bugging me.
Mate, you just out-crazied the Joker.
Well, I tried, Boomer Butt. Anyways, my home on the internet is at headspeaks.com. HEADSPEAKS.com. Links to my blog, which contain follow-up information to this and every headcast, can be found there. Both Task Force X and Headspeaks are on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and at headspeaks.com under Headcasts. Please feel free to email me any questions, comments, or concerns to taskforcex@headspeaks.com. And if you want to record a message, you can send it to me at taskforcex@headspeaks.com, and I'll play it on the air. I'm also on Facebook at Task Force X, and also on Google Plus. You can look for Task Force X under People and Pages. All titles and characters discussed are owned and copyrighted by DC Comics. I claim no ownership to the Suicide Squad, Checkmate, or Task Force X. I'm just a big fan wanting to spread the Task Force X love with everyone else. DC Comics can be found on the web at dccomics.com. Be sure to visit your local comic shop and look for Suicide Squad and Checkmate Comics. And while you're there, see what else they have that may interest you.
Mother...
Well, make sure you join us here next time for another fun-filled headcast from your friendly neighborhood Brother Head. In the meantime, I'll see you in the funny pages.
Yahtzee!